Linda Grussani Indigenous, Kitigan Zibi Anishinàbeg, Ashijitanyan, Ottawa ni Donjiba, Anishinàbe Akì, Nikikanamage, Queen's University, Miigwech, for having me here today. Hello, my name is Linda Grussani. I'm a member of the Kitigan Zibi Anishinàbeg First Nation. I am also second generation Italian Canadian through my father, who came to Canada in 1960 and met my mother Frida. And together they built a family, and I'm one of 4 children of that family. And I was born, raised, and live on Anishinàbe Akì, the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinàbe peoples. And I continue to live and work in Ottawa and doing this work, working in collections that house Indigenous belongings and ancestors. I've built a career of about 25 years working in those institutions. I'm on a little break right now. So at present, I am an independent curator, and I am a PhD candidate at Queen's University in Cultural Studies. So in the past, I've held titles as curator, director, arts administrator, and it's something that informs my research and writing as I'm working through the PhD process. My curatorial sort of approach is informed by collaborative experiences and working together. So it really is collaborative and consensus building, as well as just sort of working with the artists and the institutions, but acting as that bridge between using the experience that I've developed working in these institutions over the last 25 years. Okay, so I was invited to propose an exhibition series for On-Site Gallery. And at the time, we were just coming out of the pandemic lockdowns, and I was thinking a lot about how the pandemic really hampered and affected how we came together, and how it affected visiting in general. So we're coming out of that moment, and I just really was thinking about visiting and how the government has sort of controlled and impacted and restricted Indigenous ways of visiting historically, and then how this global pandemic was having an effect on us coming together, because not through sort of negative means, but as a way of keeping each other healthy and safe. And around that time, I was thinking, who are some artists that I would love to work with? Who did I miss the opportunity during this lockdown, this global pandemic, to really explore? And so I started to create a list of artists that I wanted to work with, and it just so happened that the 2 artists at the top of that list agreed to participate in this proposal for a series that I call Mawadishiwewin, which means visits in Algonquin Anishinàbewin. And so we worked together to create these exhibitions, and the very first exhibition features the work of Taralek Partridge. And the exhibition was called Pularatigit, which means visiting together with intention. And it was a very beautiful exhibition that came together to look at loss and memory and dealing with grief and visiting in that way. And I think, again, coming out of the pandemic, it was a very timely way of approaching things, because there was so much that we had to go through alone during the pandemic. There was loss, but there were also gifts to the pandemic in the finding of time, and we all felt we didn't all experience the pandemic in the same way. For me, it strengthened my ties to community and allowed me to slow down and focus on other communities. And one of them was building my relationship with beading communities and learning how to bead. My grandmother was a maker, creative. My mother, not so much in the traditional sense. She was a sewer of everything. She was an amazing seamstress who worked with bridal shops to do alterations on wedding dresses, and our house would be completely covered, or the basement, not the house. We were relegated to the basement to do this work, and we would have 100 wedding dresses in the basement each summer. Of my mother's performing miracles on these dresses to make these women feel as special as they should on their important days. And so there were sequins and beads and threads covering every surface in the basement, and that's how I would spend my time with my mother, and that's how we engaged. And I would help. So I wasn't learning how to sew or anything. I was just being there. It was a way for us to visit. So when finding these beading circles, it was a way for me to reconnect to that. I lost my mother 13 years ago, and so yeah, going through the pandemic was incredibly emotional to be doing that alone. So yeah, and so I found how Tagalek's exhibition. Tagalek is an amazing artist and created beautiful artworks for this exhibition, all new works, and it was just a beautiful testament to the time and the artist's relationship with her family members. And yeah, the exhibition Anishinàbeg really reflects the artist Jean Marshall's position in leading community and doing the work that Jean is doing. And to me, it reflects future directions and looking forward, and building up communities and bringing back these traditions so that we can move forward. And Jean often says it's this kind of work, the moose hide tanning, that's going to save our people. So ideas that sort of intersect between the two artists. So again, in developing the exhibition series, I wanted to work with two artists. It was always going to be two parts to this exhibition. And working with Jean and Tagalek, I wanted to work with two artists whose work that I hadn't seen singled out in a way. A lot of group exhibitions and such. I didn't know at the time that this was Tagalek Partridge's first solo exhibition. So that was, it was amazing to be able to share this experience with Tagalek and with Jean as well, like to be able to highlight Jean in a way that I felt was fitting of her amazing artistic creations, and just they're artists that I hold in very high esteem. So linking the two artists together, they're both exquisite beadwork artists that work in a style that they've developed that is iconic to their working style. So what really struck me between the two artists was the beautiful intentionality of the materials that they choose to work with. So with Tagalek, there's environmental concerns and working to give new life to materials that are found in secondhand shops, and repurposing and giving a new life to those materials in a way that is it's very environmentally aware. And also just, again, giving that new life to these works, or to these materials, in the way that Tagalek chose the wedding dresses. So a wedding dress is a dress that is used for one day and then it may not be ever seen again, so it really only serves its purpose for that one day. But then to repurpose these beautiful wedding dresses into these beautiful women's amautis, and have them presented in this exhibition, like she in turn has given them another life. And I just think that's so beautiful. And again, with the sourcing of the materials for Tea with Daisy, it was just really wonderful to be to think about that intentionality of the materials that I see in Jean's work as well, and in working with the moose hide, and to all the work that goes into assembling and processing and working these hides in order to make artwork. And it's a continued sort of process of reciprocity and gratitude. And I feel that's a thread that flows through both artists' work. And I just, before working on the exhibitions, I didn't know that would have bubbled to the surface when working with both of these artists, and I'm incredibly grateful that it has.
No, I loved both of the exhibitions, both Takarlik's and Jean's, in the element of reciprocity. It's a community building, community engagement. There's so much love to both of the exhibitions that I found, and it did touch me in that way. And it's not often that you see exhibitions like that, and I really like how your curatorial practice does have that community engagement and the community love element to it.
Yeah, and we've tried to continue that on, it's not just about putting up an exhibition. There's the relationship building, the trust building that goes on before, when you're pitching the idea, and then when you start to develop the exhibition. With both artists, this is unlike how I've worked in the past. I am a person who comes from working in these cultural institutions that have collections and have, directives. So this was the very first time that I was able to choose, or I was given free rein to choose the artists I would work with, and by extension the artworks. For the first time in 25 years, where I was given a gift of, would you like to create an exhibition series, and what would you like to do? And this was just such a beautiful way in which to engage and to sort of relearn working with community. That, when you're working in a cultural institution, there are so many people there, and you have to stick to guidelines and deadlines, and and everything is much more rigid. So this really was a gift to be able to work in an environment where it was more fluid and more flexible in working in that way. This has been a really great experience. I'm coming out of a moment where I've worked in these institutions, less flexibility in the sense because it's a large working machine, and there's lots of people to consider when you're doing these works. So this really was a return to working with university galleries. I had my start working curating exhibitions with the Carleton University Art Gallery 25 years ago. And it's, that's the kind of environment that you're working in. Everybody's wearing multiple hats, and everybody comes together and you do the work together. And so it's nice that the last 3 exhibitions that I've curated have been at university galleries, and I just find them more nimble and more responsive because there's less hands in the pot doing this work. So it was. So just I guess what I've learned from it is I really like the idea of having the time to build the relationships, to sort of have more control over how the relationships are used. I've been in situations where someone has said something to someone and it's completely decimated a relationship you've built. So it's just really great the way we were able to, I was the intermediary between on-site and the artists, and I really enjoyed working that way. So that expectations could be met, but in other ways, like, everybody was respected and treated well. And I think there's a lot of care that comes into that. So ultimately, I think thinking about this process and just slowing down the process a little, and thinking about, you know, movements like the slow fashion movement and slow cooking, that, you know, this idea of like slow curatorial practice where care is taken is something I'm taking away from this. So yeah, I'm a PhD candidate, presently working on completing my dissertation, and the curating these exhibitions has really informed a lot of the thinking process in how Indigenous curatorial practice have evolved historically, and museological practices. And so it was really timely to be working on this as I'm in this last process of the PhD dissertation writing. I am exploring beadworking. I continue to work on beading as a way of showing gratitude and reciprocity. And I'm continuing to come up with new designs, and right now I'm trying to bring together ideas of beadworking and the seven grandfather teachings, and using beads from the island of Murano, which are historically trade beads. My father was from Raquaro, which is about an hour from Murano. So in my mind, I would love to go and visit that territory with this knowledge that I have now of beading, and bringing those two, just doing some work there and bringing those two concepts together. One thing that I was most surprised about in curating these exhibitions is how they flowed and came together in such an organic way. That, you know, we have with Pulahatigit, we have sort of the looking back and that reconnection and honoring loss. And then in Anishinàbeg, it's that looking towards the future. And that's not something I planned when developing or proposing the exhibition series. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised by it, but I was working with two very generous artists, and we came together and worked in such a collaborative way to make sure that, you know, their vision was respected and presented in the best way possible. And so I think what I'm most, surprised about is just how well it came together. But, you know, when you have the trust and when you have good working relationships, you know, that is possible. And so it's just, I guess, at the end of it, because I'm coming to these exhibitions without a set list of works, and working with these artists, and in some instances I'm seeing the works in real life just as they're being installed on the walls. Like, that's a different model that I've been used to working with, where you're working with the collections. And you draw out your lists, and you're like, okay, this will go there, this will go there. This was a different approach, where these artists were coming to me and saying, this is what we want, this is what they were dreaming, this is what they wanted to do. And then as they're describing these works, I'm having visual I'm drawing the picture in my mind and getting really excited about it. So as Jean was telling me about the three beaded works, I was like, I know exactly where that's going to go in the space. And it was wonderful to come to be able to get together a number of times and to talk, and again with the artists in the gallery space, so that they were aware of the parameters they had to work with, and in terms of space and wall availability. And so it was just really great that we were able to build these custom exhibitions for this space. So very, very happy and filled with gratitude to be able to to share this journey with those artists and with On-Site. Chimigwach.